Welcome back to the podcast. This is my series of Jack of All Comics, and that was the trade that came out earlier this year. I have the privilege of bringing several of the writers who did various pieces on the book. This time around, I have Bob Greenberger and Ed Cato. Bob, tell the fans a little bit about yourself, and then Ed, you can do the same thing.
Sure. I started reading comic books when I was 6 years old, and I was Superman, and there was mostly DC stuff. Interestingly, it wasn't until the Marvel cartoons hit in the fall of 1966 that I even knew Marvel existed. And then I came home one day, and there was a copy of Thor 136 on my kitchen table. And of course, that was my introduction not only to Marvel Comics, but to Jack as an artist. And that led me to becoming a journalist and a fiction writer. Spent 20 years as an editor at DC Comics and a year as a publishing executive at Marvel. And since then, I've been writing and editing all sorts of stuff. And my day job is as a high school English teacher in Maryland.
Ed, tell the fans about you.
Oh, sure. I'm Bob Greenberger light, I think. So I'm a guy who grew up with comics. Those Marvel cartoons, I lived way upstate in New York State, and WOR carried those cartoons during the day. And I knew if I pretended to be sick, I could go home and watch them at 10 or 11. So I did that a couple times till my mom caught on to the trick. And then it was no more phony sick Marvel cartoons. Since then, I really enjoyed comics in all different arenas and levels, and I have a lot of fun. Like Bob, I do a little writing and do a little editing. And also I do teaching during the day too. We're funny guys to have on with the similar things. Yeah, it's been a great ride for me.
Ed, you're also the editor of Retrofan. Tell the fans a little bit about Retrofan again, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah. So Retrofan, geez, I can't believe I didn't have a copy. Retrofan is a cool magazine started by Michael Urey, great guy, visionary type. And it's not only about comics, although we put a lot of comic stuff in, but it's about all sorts of nostalgic, passionate things. So it might be old movies or TV shows. It might be an old TV show like Banachek, which we had Bob write a killer article coming up soon. And it's a lot of fun. It's like a big party with a big tent. So you can celebrate everything from Evel Knievel to a television show with a genre aspect to a crazy trend like the Apollo space trend that Jim Beard, the editor of this, wrote about for retro fans. I've been doing it about a year and took over from Michael. We've got all these amazing writers on board. The designer, Scott Savidra, who's also a writer, is an A+ designer. So the magazine looks just beautiful, and I'm really proud to be associated with it.
Ed, you do Crazy 8 Press, and that's crossed across my radar a lot.
Bob.
You do Crazy 8 Press. Tell the fans a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
We conceived the project 15 years ago this summer, and it was a gaggle of writers who were getting very frustrated that they had projects that they were passionate about, but we were constantly being told by the mainstream publishers, oh, what a great concept. And that got increasingly frustrating. Michael Jan Friedman, Peter David, myself, Aaron Rosenberg, Roscoe Chimero, basically banded together with a few others to create our digital press hub. We write and do our own books, but we all share the same imprint and website. So this way we can bring all of our audiences to the same place. And we've been publishing books and novels, anthologies. We've published a handful of people from outside our group over the last decade and a half, and we're still here.
So what made each of you, and I'll have Ed go first, into Kirby fans? What made the light bulbs go off?
Sure. I think Alex Toth made me interested in Jack Kirby because that Hanna-Barbera Fantastic Four cartoon, like with these beautiful Toth designs, really got me interested in the Fantastic Four and the majesty of it and the tragedy of it all. That led me to that series, and that was really my entry point. And then trying to understand what Jack was doing at DC when he was brought over. I remember being perplexed by that that wonderful ad in the DC books, the great one is coming. And like my dad was always super supportive of comics and my love of comics. We knew who Jack Kirby was, and it was like, wait, he's going to work for the other company and what's going on. So I was right there, like the end of the Silver Age, that Bronze Agey DC thing. And actually I was a little disappointed with some of his books when he returned to Marvel, Black Panther and Eternals and the Cap run and all that. But somehow the more I learned about him and everything he did on his own and with partners, just have great admiration. My Jack Kirby hardcover shelf is overflowing, and you learn about Stuntmaster and Black Rider and all these amazing things this guy did. And so I think I celebrate the incredible volume of the guy's life. But my entry point was really that classic Marvel FF Thor type thing.
How about you, Bob?
As I said, I started with his Thor run, and I'm 8 years old. I'm looking at this stuff, and I could already tell from the Marvel cartoons that there were different art styles being used in the same story. And I was very easily attracted to the Kirby stuff. I was recognizing that, and then I found him in other comics. And there was a definite energy to his stuff that was different than I was mostly reading the Julie Schwartz DC line at the time. It was very clean, slick style. And I could see there was something very different about Kirby's work. By 1970, I was already reading fanzines, and we were all floored to read in Don and Maggie Thompson's Newfangles that Kirby was leaving Marvel for DC. And that was like a seismic shockwave in the business at the time. So I was eagerly looking forward to seeing what he would do with the Fourth World stuff, and was very happy with it. Like Ed, a little disappointed by his return to Marvel because he was slowing down. There was a step missing.
So how did you guys each, and we'll go again with Ed, how did you each get involved with the book and get to talk about the particular topic in the book?
Oh, sure. I blackmailed Jim Beard to get a spot in this book, and I'm so glad I did. I talked to him about some of the things that I really liked, and I chose that, like Tales of Suspense. They had a lot of Kirby, a lot of other talents in there too, cascading into the early Cap first dozen issues or so before Steranko took over. And yeah, I love those. And it's funny, Bob, that you brought up the cartoon, because like in my essay, I talked about those Tales of Suspense and that great sense of urgency. And I felt like that's what those cartoons were all about. And you could see looking back, like Kirby's sleeper story, it was like, okay, here we go. Panel 2. It's holy cow. What are you going to do? There's a giant robot and you got to face this challenge. And it just grabbed you by the lapels and made you want to learn about it and read about it. For me, that was a lot of fun. There wasn't like a big supporting cast with those Captain America stories, but it was really like, holy smokes, let's get going. And for me, that was fun. And I think that sense of urgency and the kinetic energy that Kirby always had with all his work blossomed there, even despite some like bad inking, just blossomed and shone through and sticks with a guy like me all these years later. I was going to say 40, but God, it's more than
For me, I've written for Jim's various anthologies dating back to his Gotham City 14 Miles book about the Batman 66 TV show. So unlike Ed, I didn't have to blackmail him. I was invited into this book, and we saw a laundry list of the series he wanted to cover. And I knew people would be glomming onto FF and Thor and Cap and stuff. So I like Nick Fury as a character. And I think his run on Strange Tales is overshadowed by Steranko. So I volunteered for that and was delighted to reread those stories.
Ed, you were covering the Silver Age Captain America. It was basically Tales of Suspense from 59 through 99. He penciled 41 of those, and then he went on to do 100 through 109 of the solo title, which is about another 10 issues, which was about 51 all the way. How do you think Kirby felt about drawing Captain America after all those years? Do you think he was excited about it? Could you see it in his art? What do you think about that?
Yeah, such a fascinating question. And I think we all try to analyze those things. And I think we tend to apply the way pop culture and intellectual property is dealt with today and 2025. If there's an actor who's returning to do a TV show he used to do or a reboot, how does he or she deal with that? The real answer is I have no idea what Jack felt. I have no idea. But I think that it's a little bit of a trap for us to assign the values that we have today. Like, I don't think he was going to his closet and pulling out his bagged and boarded copies of Captain America from 1943 to compare, because that didn't happen, because it was all a job. And it was a short-lived job in many ways to start on Captain America way back when. Probably a bittersweet job as well, as you create something and then you don't participate in the success of it. Captain America, that original comic, changed a lot over the years and became like a creepy mystery comic. And Bucky was shot and there was like a girl sidekick that we all forgot about. And when the series was rebooted, I think those of us who were little boys back then thought it was being picked up and right from where it ended. And those like golden age masterpiece reprints that Marvel or Stan was putting out led to this notion like, oh yeah, there's all these comics out there. I'll probably never get a chance to read them, but this is a continuation. I don't think it was that. I know it wasn't that clear continuation. And I think for a guy like Jack, it was maybe not another job, but I don't think it was that moment where he came home to his wife, said, oh man, this is going to be the greatest day ever. I'm drawing a page of Captain America again. I tend to think he did his best, which is better than anyone else's best, and hopefully found some joy within it. But I don't think there was as much contemplation or reflection as almost we fans wish there was.
So do you think it was not so much nostalgia, but redefining what it meant to be a patriotic character and during the times of the 60s? The patriotism, he was trying to emphasize some of that in his art.
I would almost argue I'd see more in those issues, less about being a patriot, but more about being an older guy in the youthful culture. A lot of those, Cap isn't necessarily, oh, I love my country. He's, oh man, it's 20 years later, which now that I'm 62, 20 years ago seems like yesterday. But the character was struggling to fit in. And I think in some ways, probably Jack's ideas were struggling to fit in. His boss, Stan, would have been the young kid that he knew as a young kid who grew in the company. So I wish there was maybe a little more of that patriotic thing. He did that bicentennial Treasury edition that was beating the bicentennial drum, and maybe there was some of that in there. But yeah, I tend to think it was less about patriotism and more about fitting in, and especially the struggles that we all have, or at least I have, as we grow older and fitting in with the youthful culture.
Do you think Kirby set the bar for later artists who came in and drew Captain America? That this is how Captain America should be?
Oh, sure. I think his 60s stuff really set the bar, and he was so much the house style. I remember as a kid, like loving that Englehart Sal Buscema run. And that was lovely and so straightforward and the right art for the right age for me. But at the same time, I'm thinking, oh, it's not Kirby. It's not a Steranko podcast, but I'd say that Steranko's work on Captain America also was very important at that time and very important to later artists too.
Bob, you did Strange Tales with Nick Fury, which is a little bit different because he only did about 10 to 12 issues where he mainly did the layouts, not necessarily all the art.
Acting there is that seemed to be where Stan was breaking in the new talent and over Kirby's layouts. So when John Buscema came back to Marvel, as great a draftsman as he wasn't doing it the dynamic Stan way that he wanted. Same with Steranko. And you could see they instantly grasped it, because once they started doing their own solo work, you can see that they picked up the key pieces. But my research shows that Jack was more the plotter for this than Stan. Jack had the idea to take Fury after he had been introduced in Fantastic Four as working for the CIA and run with him as a spy in an era where you had James Bond in the films and Man from U.N.C.L.E. on NBC. It made sense that Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be the Marvel equivalent of all of that, and lean into the espionage stuff, but heightened. My whole thrust of the essay was just how much technology Jack had to create for both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, just the imagination that had to go into all of that creation in 12-page stories that had to hold together. It's also one of the rare times when Stan took a vacation and let Jack do the dialoguing, and Stan credits him for that. So there's no question about the authenticity of the credit. That, in some ways, coming back to Cap probably was a delight for Jack because he created it. It's great to see the guy still around. But for Kirby, this was, being the plotter, I think it was a little more of a passion project.
So it's safe to say that pretty much everything we know about S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury basically came from these strange tales that Jack Kirby did during that time. Is that correct?
That's one argument, yes.
And do you think his early plotting lit the fire for him to go on to do other writing and stuff? When did Kirby decide, hey, I can actually be a writer?
Actually, back in the days of the Simon Kirby team in the Golden Age, they were both writing stories for themselves and for others, especially when after they left DC and they started up their own company like Mainline, they were writing stories for other people. After that, when Jack had to come back to DC, he wasn't the writer anymore, but he returned to the writing roots, collaborating with Stan on all the different stuff at the beginning of the Marvel Age. And I think Stan was so busy, he was delighted that Jack was passionate about taking on a series.
You guys were both talking about some good and not so stellar inkers. Talk about some of the people that inked Kirby's time back during these two series. Ed, you can go first.
Oh yeah, can I just add one thing?
You can add whatever you want.
That he made me think about is, I think the technology in that was so important, and it's not an audio medium. You can almost hear like the clicking and the whirring of things, or the way the cars would flip their wheels up in those S.H.I.E.L.D. stories, and that was all Jack. When you see that in the movies, you're like, oh yeah, I've been imagining that all these years, and all from Jack. I thought that was a great thing that you brought up, Bob. What's that?
The inkers, this is a period where having a consistent inker on the backup features and the two features per title in Tales of Suspense and Strange Tales and Tales to Astonish, I think the shorter features suffered by giving the pages to whoever was available that week, as opposed to keeping Joe Sinnott on the FF and Vinnie Coletta on Thor. Jack was fortunate to get John Severin to ink a chunk of the Strange Tales material. They worked together on the Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos book, so I think it was a natural fit for Severin to be doing some of that, and it looked great. Severin's texture grounded the fantastic elements and made you think that these were guys on the street using these fantastic weapons.
How about you?
Yeah, you almost would think Severin wouldn't work, right? Like you need that slickness of a Sinnott or even Steranko, but those Sinnott or those Severin collaborations are wonderful.
So, do you have anything else to add about the inking, Ed?
Oh yeah, I don't know. Sometimes like the unappreciated inkers, like Frank Giacoia, so solid, not flashy, but gets the point across very succinctly and quickly. That was great. And there's in the Tales of Suspense, there's some nice Ramita collaborations too that have a real charm. Funky Homecoming or team up too. And some other folks like George Tuska, I think doesn't really hold up as well with some of the inking to today's eyes, but I'm sure he tried hard.
Bob, how do you think this chunk of Stan Lee doing Nick Fury holds up and stands up to all of his other Silver Age stuff that he's done during the 60s? Where's the place for that?
How far do we go?
I'm not here to bash Stan. I'm here to just acknowledge from my research, this is what I believe happened. It was Stan, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., was fundamental in introducing new elements that populated the Marvel Universe. Having Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. suddenly became like glue for a lot of the other stories. And you can see that late in Jack's run as it starts to cross over with things happening in Captain America and Tales of Suspense. The Avengers, I think, touched on some of this stuff. And then you have the creation of Nick, and you have the creation of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Helicarrier. You've got the resurrection of Gabe Jones and Duggan as agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so we know they survived World War II. So in some ways, Stan was using it to expand and cement the Marvel Universe.
So how do you, Ed, feel about his Captain America standing up among his Silver Age stuff?
Yeah, I think Cap had some great interactions in the Strange Tales issues, in fact, where he guest starred, and those were great. There were a few issues where Captain America is in New York and he feels, geez, what am I doing? The whole world's changed, and he fights like ordinary people. And then there was a shift where he's always reminiscing and it's, oh, let's just go tell all these old stories. And some of them are just the same old stories that were published before, where, okay, it's World War II, let's go at it. And then near the end of that Tales of Suspense, it gets that excitement where Cap is flying in a shield, was it Avengers Quinjet or a shield jet or something, and he goes to Wakanda and he jumps out and there's a challenge, then there's another challenge. I'm the Black Panther, let's go to town, we got to do this. And then it clicks into those early issues of Captain America. And then I feel like the thread got lost or it got a little mundane again. So there was a brief time when it was clicking, but I don't think it was the greatest stories. I think the concepts were good. The characters were good. The Kirby art looks great. Some of the covers are beautiful. But like, if I would want to just enjoy the stories and what was going on, I think the Strange Tales, S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff were more fun story-wise.
Bob, how would a new fan just getting into comic books approach Kirby?
The art styles have evolved and tastes have changed over the last 40 years, 50 years. And I think a lot of them, if they look at the classic Silver Age Kirby material across the board, could probably appreciate the dynamism and the energy and the creativity he brought to each story. But his exaggerated foreshortening and I think some of the thick fingers and bulky body shapes are not what is contemporary, what people are looking for. They're looking for either heightened photorealism or more realistic looking bodies, especially men. The women, Jack didn't always do great women. Sif and the Invisible Girl may be the exceptions.
Your turn, Ed.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think one of the nice things is that nice compact format that is being reprinted, like a little smaller than comic size, all these books. I think that tends to make Kirby's art a little more palatable to younger eyes because it's a little smaller, it's more detailed. I think everything that Bob said with the dynamics of it are probably the things that would appeal, but yeah, it's a bit of a tough sell. And some of the things that he was an older guy where characters are saying jumping comics, the Pacific stuff, I think is very difficult for younger readers to glom onto.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to stick with Ed again. Ed, you give your closing thoughts, and then Bob, you do the same thing.
Here, two closing thoughts. One, I should have answered that last one differently. Here's my better answer. I think the grand story of Jack Kirby is like the struggle of the creative entrepreneur and how he worked very hard to be creative, and that struggle that doesn't always turn out to be the person who's the billionaire getting a lot of money. He fought the good fight. He loved his family. He had a high degree of personal responsibility towards his family. And those are all very wonderful characteristics. It's nice that like the Disney organization calls Jack Kirby a legend now. It doesn't really help Jack. Those things are nice. So I think that's a great piece of Kirby. Also, I wish I had mentioned Sid Shores, who was also a Golden Age artist who worked on the strip in the old days. He collaborated with Jack to ink a few of those issues. And I have no idea if they laughed about it or reminisced, but as a fanboy, that's a nice collaboration. I do love the fact that there's an appreciation on a level beyond the comic shop, beyond Tomorrow's magazines, beyond Becky Books for Jack Kirby. And I think that's a fabulous win for everyone who works hard to be creative.
Let's see if you can top that one, Bob.
Ooh, challenge.
He's topping his sleep.
Jack Kirby in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was one of the prime creators of stories that continue to remain in print today because of their imagination and their energy, and depending on the series, either sense of wonder or sense of fun. There's a reason DC and Marvel continue to keep his material in print. There's a reason why other publishers have taken the mainline and other books that he and Joe did and keep them alive, because there's something fundamentally important about having Jack's material available to be discovered by people who may be getting into comics now and are curious about who were the pioneers of the past. Jack stands head and shoulders above them and deserves to be recognized. So yes, Disney treating him as a legend is great. I continue to thrill to see how many movies and TV shows continue to credit him in the special thanks.
Bob, Ed from Jack of All Comics, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
So nice to speak with you, Ron.
Thanks for having us.